For those of you that want to know more about the Garden of Eden, how it would have sat in Pangea, potentially being in Brazil, I will now actually give you the contradictory perspective of the same idea. Now, if you take Genesis and Revelation and you kind of mash them together and you start to see a lot of correlation between different references, points, symbolism, you have this interesting story in Revelation talking about these end times, kind of the final physical earthly battle in which the devil musters his armies and they march down the Tigris and the Euphrates. Very interestingly, the Tigris and the Euphrates, I think they both flow out of Turkey. And actually, in the last 10 years, Turkey has built dams on all of the waterways. And Turkey actually has the ability to close the dams and dry up. Those rivers could be stopped at any point. They close up the dams, the Tigris and the Euphrates would both dry up, causing wonderful lanes, roads, right to essentially Baghdad. You've all heard Baghdad, all the things going on in the Middle East. But what's interesting to me is Baghdad is 50 miles north of the location that they believe Babylon was. Now, interestingly, in the book of Revelation, there are several references to Egypt, Babylon. Babylon doesn't die. It is constantly referred to. What is most interesting to me is that Babylon in the original language is actually means gate of God. So if you look at Genesis, okay, here's Adam and Eve, they eat of the fruit, they're kicked out of the garden, cherubim, flaming sword, guard it, so that they can't partake of the tree of life. And then you get to the end of the Bible, the Revelation, and it almost seems like it's talking about the devil, like physically manifests, becomes a person. You know, the Antichrist, there's multiple, it's not just like one person, but you do kind of have this apex or climax at the end where maybe the devil comes in a physical, like, enduring form. I don't know. What if his final push is because if he does take on flesh, he has the problem. Finite doesn't live infinitely. So in flesh, he needs to get to the tree of life. So he's actually making a final push because the Garden of Eden wasn't a physical place. It is a parallel framework in which this one exists. There is a portal, some type of physical or spiritual gateway that the devil's trying to get back through to have access to the tree of life. Sounds very sci-fi. But when you look at the story of Genesis, you have this garden that's just perfect. It's eternal. There's no death, decay. In fact, the devil and Hades, the kingdom of the dead, which is talked about in Scripture, was there a Hades or a kingdom of the dead before death entered the world? When Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, God told them you will surely die, because when you're going from infinite and eternal, or at least eternal, to you're on a ticking time bomb, you're getting old, you're going to die. They had died. In an eternal perspective, like, time goes by so fast. So when they ate of it and death entered the world, now there is a kingdom for those people, things that die, Hades. That is when the devil's kingdom was established, the kingdom that he's been trying to build. That's why he kills, steals, and destroys. He's trying to build his kingdom. And the whole message of Jesus is building God's kingdom, heaven's order on earth now. So when they ate of the fruit, death, Hades, the devil, though, wants to be in the living world, ruling over the dead, trying to get to the tree of life. And you start to get this Genesis to Revelation arc where Maybe it's significant to you. Maybe it's not. But what is interesting is when you start to study in a time where I was very angry because everything I'd learned about God seemed to come up very short. I delved into research and study into time, space, and ironically, the two greatest mysteries of theoretical physicist science is life. How did life begin? And time. Those are the two great mysteries. And when you look at Genesis, you actually start to see this framework of Moses is kind of telling you, hey, here's Genesis 1. It's more from an eternal perspective because there's trees and things bearing fruit and seeds after their own kind, but nothing had yet grown because there's no process happening. It's not a physical reality yet. This time hasn't started. And if you read Hawkins and Einstein, you start to realize that people are confounded, like it's time, space. They don't really know how to explain it. But in my head, it seems very clear that time is simply a measurement of events, occurrence, cause and effect, half-life, decay. So I've talked about entropy. Entropy is when we use useful energy, some of its usefulness is lost and is winding down. So if you have entropy, that happens when you have choice, a choice to use energy. So what you have playing out in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 is reconciled because when they eat of the fruit, could be that's discussion of the fruit is a whole nother thing too. But when they eat of the fruit, they have the knowledge of good and evil. They now have choice to use, and the physical sequence, this time clock, begins in their reality. This, whatever they were in, is the eternal subparticle molecular quantum baseline, and it wasn't a physical place. If it's not a physical place, then it would make sense. The devil's trying to get to some gateway, Babylon, the gate of God, in Revelation. So, contradictory to the previous. It's also possible that the Amazon rainforest wasn't the Garden of Eden because it was never actually a physical place.